one of the arguments that I've been making in this course, and in a sense been making it more and more explicit as we have been rolling into and towards the present, is that what happens in wars shapes peace. And the nature of peace, in a sense, lay the conditions for future conflicts. That there's a dialectic between fighting and coexisting, between war and peace. And the way I left things at the last lecture was to indicate the ways in which, even as the war wound down, we see the seeds of the future conflict being sown. That the making of the bipolar world began in the 30 years conflict. This epic photograph of Hiroshima, just to remind you where we're at, was in fact meant to be consumed by others in the world to see the awesome might of, in particular, the military establishment of the United States, the capacity now to destroy. And of course, it had been done without consulting other allies like the Soviet Union, that this campaign had intensified deliberately to send a message to Stalin. Stalin had reason to believe that this was one of the reasons why it was timed as such. Because already the feuding had begun for the future of the peace over where the lines would be drawn in Europe. You have to realize that by the time the war was dropped in Japan, the Soviets were in control of much of Europe, these being the buffer regions that the Soviet Union was after. And in fact, after Nagasaki after the bombing of Nagasaki, Truman warned Stalin to steer clear of the Balkans, right? That the Balkans belonged to nobody's sphere in particular. And so the bomb was a message to the Soviet Union, a message to the Soviet Union to allow, in these areas of Europe, for free elections to be held. And yet, by its very nature, the bomb set off a new kind of arms race. 4 years later, the Soviets would detonate their own weapon, and we're on our road to mutually assured destruction. So the Cold War begins inside the Second World War. And just to repeat, Hitler brought the Soviet Union into the center of Europe itself. And a figure like George Kennan read this as a new model, or rather a new expression of an old model of Soviet foreign policy. Hence the famous telegram from Washington and the Foreign Affairs article. So, just to recap, this is how we see in the beginnings of the new age in 1945, already seeds of what's to come are apparent.